Welcome, travelers, to another chapter of Jaguar Woman. Today is October 4, 12:17 a.m. in California, United States. We seek not rest but transformation. We are dancing through each other as doorways. We are ripples crossing and fuzzing, journeying and returning. From the core of the apple, the eye of the mandala, the cave in the heart of the rose, the circle without boundaries centered on silence. Marge Piercy, circling. After dinner, Agnes went back to the hacienda. I lay back in a hammock under the thatched overhang and listened to the sound of the wind and the chattering noises of the night. Soon, I was fast asleep. Zoila's throaty song to the eastern sky woke me at dawn. I felt sluggish and incapable of exerting myself. New light from the rising sun splashed over us and made my eyes blink. For a moment, I felt as though I were living in another lifetime. I took a deep breath of warm, fresh air. The scent of cooking tortillas contrasted with the pecan garden soil. The hammock swayed gently. I started to doze off again. I was soon floating on a warm, sweet wave of oblivion when, with no warning, my hammock took a dramatic swing. I came to my senses at once, barely landing on my feet. "Zoila, you scared me." "You frighten easily." She had a white smile showing 2 rows of beautiful white teeth. I felt the power of her eyes, which were not smiling. "It is time to track the sun, my lazy, indolent daughter. We have a long trail to bridge today. Be alert and intelligent. Salute the sun, the great chief, as her teacher Agnes calls this essential star. Hold up your arms to Venus. She precedes the sun and is called the sweeper of the path." I did as I was told. First, I prayed to the eastern horizon, where the sun was a liquid silver oval set in the hazy purple sky. Then I prayed to Venus, the morning star still shining in the heavens. As I stood there, I was taken by the beauty in front of me. Zoila interrupted my sublime feelings. "Go eat," she said. "Have you eaten, Zoila?" I asked. Zoila's demeanor was decidedly different from the night before. "Yes, before sunrise. Take some fruit from the trees. There are tortillas inside." I picked an avocado and a mango and went inside the house. It was silent, no familiar sounds of family life. An old yellow dog slept on the doorstep. I tripped over a corner of an Indian rug on the hard-packed dirt floor. Then I burned my finger on the frying pan while removing a tortilla. "Ouch!" I jowled, licking my finger and blowing on it. Zoila laughed. "You've really got it in for yourself, don't you?" She tapped on the floor with her bamboo walking stick and continued laughing. I asked if I could examine the staff she held in her left hand. "Yes," she said. She handed it to me. "It is the mark of the shaman, or shamaness." Tracing my index finger down the many long grooves, I asked, "What does these lines mean?" "It is not as simple as it looks. The top lines represent the 7 heavenly layers, or facets. The bottom lines represent the 5 layers of the lower world. In the old way, the creator deity lives in the 7th heaven and carries the sun. The sun is not a deity. The death god dwells in the 5th level of the underworld." I handed the cane back to Zoila and remarked on the craftsmanship involved in carving the symbols. "I carved it," she said. "Hurry and eat. We will speak more of this walking stick later. Now we must go with the sun to the caldera in the west." "Doesn't that mean cauldron?" "Yes. This is the cauldron of the Earth Mother." I ate my tortillas and, fruit in hand, followed Zoila out the door. She headed due west. Her brisk stride reminded me of the way Agnes walked. I have always liked to walk slowly, so it was a big effort to keep up with her pace. We followed a trail through low jungle and dense undergrowth. It was rough going. Zoila used her staff like a third leg, moving at an unison with her right leg as she walked. She wore a thin white huiple and a blue woven skirt. She did not speak, nor did she look back at me. Occasionally, the trail would become completely overgrown, and I would see the flash of Zoila's machete. The sun was getting high in the sky when we began to climb. The Yucatan seemed so flat and the foliage so dense that I easily lost perspective on elevations. I heard the far-off sound of rushing water. The trees became taller, and soon we were in a high jungle with screeching green and yellow birds and a clamor of insects. The trees were covered with air plants bearing colorful blooming stalks. Long flowering vines hung from high trees. Through the swaying branches, I could see low magenta-colored hills in the distance. They gave me the impression of having just been born from the jungle floor. I was getting tired. Still, I heard the surging of water. Zoila stopped and pointed to a ledge in front of us. We had climbed to a considerable height. Pointing with her walking stick, she said, "Here is where we meet the guardian of La Caldera. We are on the east lip of the caldera. It is called the place of acknowledging, or the place of the first ceremony. Now we are going to have a ceremony to introduce you to Tepochtli, the goddess of the shamans and magicians. She will show you the sacred spiral and many aspects of yourself. Come here. I will conduct you over the trail." I followed Zoila as she walked over to a flat place. She pointed downward with her staff. I gasped. The jungle below us formed an enormous crater, and we were standing on the rim. The canyon was so deep that I couldn't see the bottom. It was obscured in mist. To my right was a jagged trail, a tiny ledge carved into the rock. I followed it with my eyes as it curved out of sight. The narrow path spiraled around and around inside of La Caldera, down to the center. I laughed, but my stomach turned over. Wide-eyed, I grabbed Zoila's arm. "Zoila, there's no way that I can go down that trail. I'm not good at heights. I'm not sure that I could ever make it." Tears were beginning to come. "Let's get started," Zoila promptly scurried off and left me. I was dismayed. I would never venture one foot on that treacherous precipice. I stayed put. "Damn it, Zoila," I wailed. "Don't leave me here. Can't you see I'm terrified? I can't do this. I just can't." Agnes said that you had courage. Perhaps you don't. Now you'll never see what's at the bottom. I didn't have much choice. Zoila was about to disappear out of sight. I had come here to learn something from her. And like it or not, I had to trust her. "Wait a minute," I called. I put one sandaled foot in front of the other, pressed against the ledge, and started. I knew I had to get control of my thoughts, or even better, not think at all. If I thought about it, I would be frozen with terror. I started after Zoila. Pieces of rocks crumbled under my sandals and rolled off the ledge, bouncing down out of sight. I tried not to look down. Tears were stinging my eyes. I was fearful, and I knew I was not a skilled enough climber to navigate this narrow path. I was sure that I would momentarily slip and fall to my death. The trail became even narrower, barely the breadth of my foot. I gasped for air, remembering to breathe and trying to relax. I didn't dare stop and force my will to pull my body ahead. I rounded the edge of the cliff. Zoila was in view, walking slowly and carefully, like a mountain goat. She moved more quickly when the trail permitted. Because of my fear of heights, my mind didn't want my body to continue, but some deep longing made me willing to follow Zoila. It was as if all my concepts of self had exploded in my head, leaving me with only my willpower to help me survive. My mind, its fear, were useless on this precarious pathway. I was battling with my conception of who I was and what I could do. Knowing I couldn't do it, I did it anyway. This process produced a numbness of thought. so my fear did not paralyze me. As we slowly traversed around and down, I became more sure of myself, letting go of my first level of terror. As we went further, other deeper levels of terror became released, until an ecstatic feeling flooded through my being. Just as I had gained some confidence, we came to a sheer cliff where the trail had crumbled away, leaving a 4-foot gap to the other side, where the path began again. Zoila leaped across easily, her skirt billowing around her knees in a blue puff. She went on a few paces and then glanced back at me. Well, she demanded. My God, Zoila, I can't do it. I really can't this time. Then we part, she said. Good luck on your climb back up. It's about to rain, and it will be more slippery. There was a scorn in her voice. She turned and started walking. I screamed at her, Zoila, please! Don't desert me like this. I was crying again, with uncontrollable sobs. I stood there for several minutes until I had stopped crying and become calm. I judged the distance and my footing, and leaped across. The thought I held in my mind was, if I fall, I fall. It had a sort of Gertrude Stein ring to it. How very original, Lynn, I thought. If I fall, I fall. Once across, my knees began to shake like ribbons in the wind. They didn't stop shaking, but I kept going. Ahead of me, Zoila turned around to face me. I expected a pat on the back and a compliment for my courage. Come on, that was pathetic. I'm surprised you aren't smashed and mangled somewhere down there. She pointed toward the canyon floor, then turned back to the trail and continued on her way. Her attitude wounded me deeply. I'm sorry guys, that was pretty funny. I realized how desperately I wanted her approval. I decided she was right. I was pathetic, for I was crying again. To add to my misery, the trail got even worse. We clung to bushes and jagged pieces of rock. Sometimes my toes edged over a cliff that seemed to drop off into forever. It was steep, uneven, and exceedingly slow going. We came to a small cave and sat down. I was out of breath and dripping with perspiration. I was still miffed at Zoila and didn't say anything. She looked calm, perhaps a little bored. Sitting there, I realized how stiff I was and how many aches and pains I had. I gazed at the fantastic views across the canyon. The sky was golden. I could see the narrow path spiral upward, and I was amazed that I had managed it. Nearby, a glint of sunlight caught my eye. I stood up, and there on the ledge was a gold Mayan mask inlaid with a turquoise, emerald, and jade. The stones were carved in an exquisite snake and jaguar designs. Zoila, look at these gems and this mask. It's surely solid gold. Do you know why it's here? Zoila's voice had a matter-of-fact quality. It is a beautiful trinket. You take it. It is a gift from the spirits of the caldera. I climbed up the almost perpendicular ledge and ran my hands over the gleaming surface of the mask, brushing away the dust. It's worth a fortune. Take it. But I can't just take it, Zoila. Maybe it's here for a reason. Of course you can. You found it. But I simply can't. I don't know why, but I can't. I took a final look at the gorgeous mask, shimmering in the sun. The bright stones glimmered alluringly. I turned away and crawled down from the ledge. The discovery had somehow made me melancholy. Zoila, you take it. I just can't. Never, Zoila said. Treasures belong to the one who first sees them. I shook my head. Then move, she said, and she was off once more. I followed, wondering why I had left such a treasure behind me. Soon, I stopped even these thoughts as I began to slip and slide, very nearly falling off the ledge and in the process managing to wrench my back. The pain shot up my spinal cord. Zoila, my back! I've hurt my back! Zoila stopped and gazed at me in a solemn silence. You look like you might survive, she said cynically. Thanks, I mumbled under my breath. My back felt like it had a dagger in it, but I kept going. By now, the four edges of the canyon were towering all around us. It was becoming more like we were in a great depression in the jungle floor, created by centuries of running water. The jungle smells of old spice and dark earth blew on the wind. A low mist surrounded the waterfall at the bottom and billowed through the treetops. We were nearing the nadir. The air became even more damp and the trail even more slippery. We walked carefully and soon were enshrouded in the mist. I could barely see Zoila in front of me, and the sound of rushing water was quite loud. I stopped for a moment to sneeze. As I opened my eyes, the mist began to swirl into a funnel, as if I assisted by some supernatural power. It seemed to be disappearing down into the middle of an enormous vortex, which was created by a whirlpool on the surface of a river at the bottom of a waterfall. Zoila put her arm around me to steady me. Zoila, I said, we have just walked into a spiral within La Caldera, have we not? We have. How can there be a river down here at the bottom of this crater? It cuts underground near where we begin our descent and comes out over there. She pointed with her walking stick. And then, where does it go? It goes into the canyon wall over there and is subterranean for many miles. The river comes up out of a mouth of the earth. I will take you there one day if you want to see it. We descended lower, and I watched in an awe as pieces of foam flew up into the air. The logs drifting on the river's edge were caught in the force of the whirlpool, pulled under, and disappeared. That is where we came from, Zoila said in my ear. She pointed at the middle of the whirlpool with her stick. It is to that mystery we are trying to return. My eyes could bear only so much of looking into the whirlpool. I leaned a little against Zoila for support, feeling clumsy and ungainly. She moved with such grace, we were both dripping wet from the heat and the gathering moisture of mist and spray. I noticed big liquid drops running down the sides of Zoila's face. She turned to me and said, "See the vanishing point in the center? That's the void. Watch how a path is created by ripples spiraling out from the center. You were born of the void. And the swell is like the outwardness of things. This is like our earth walk. In our youth and ignorance, we walk further and further from the center, until we are very far away from our original nature. That is how life is. This is its pattern. Most of us live way out on the perimeter of the spiral. Then, at some point in life, something special happens to you, an insight, a death, and you begin to wonder about yourself and ask questions. What does life mean? Where do I come from? Has this not happened to you? Yes. Haven't you wondered why it is difficult to find your true nature? Yes, I have tried to find my way home. Go back to the source. Watch the whirlpool. From such powers the universe has evolved. The powers of the universe are within you. See how everything is swallowed into the center? It is ordained that all be pulled in. The universe will feed into itself, and all creatures great and small will be liberated. Then why is it so difficult for us, Zoila? Because of ignorance and false identity. Come, follow me. I followed along, and soon we were standing on the canyon floor at the bottom of the spiraling trail. This way, Zoila said. The ground was wet and swollen, and a swampy area, with the ground deep and sucking, retarded our progress. Tall reeds were abundant in all directions. A broad expanse of water plunged and rumbled from the mouth of a cave to the left. Silvery green leaves on gray, gnarled trees rustled in the wind, standing out starkly against the backdrop of the dark canyon walls. Golden streams of sunlight, as brilliant as searchlights, illuminated the forest. The cliffs above were dressed in dark shadows, creating puzzling and shifting images. I was giddy with exhaustion, and drank it all in. The canyon was like a primordial dream, and I was absorbed with the spirit of the place. We pushed through some reeds to the edge of the pool beneath the falls. The noise thundered in my ears. We were about 25 feet from the whirlpool. I watched branches and small tree swirled out of sight. Being so close made me shudder. "Watch carefully, Lynn," Zoila said loudly. "Realize that those branches and that tree are sucked into the center without the slightest effort. Perhaps it is identification with objects and clinging to addictions that keep you from the source." I nodded my head in acknowledgement. After a few moments, watching the whirlpool, Zoila said, "Let's walk over there near the falls." Zoila leaped from the stone on which she had been standing to another rock, and then down. She disappeared into a wall of reeds and a bank of mist. "Wait a minute," I yelled. I had pursued her for about 5 paces when I started sinking deeper into the mud and sand. The earth was shifting underneath me. As soon as I was up to my knees and stuck, I screamed for Zoila, but the roar of the falls drowned out my voice. I tried to turn back, but I couldn't even do that. I struggled and sank to my thighs. I screamed again for Zoila until my voice trembled. The situation seemed impossible. At the moment, I felt Zoila was a cold and evil woman. There was no compassion in the world. Everything was against me. All I could do was struggle against forces that were out to destroy me. I cursed my fate and Agnes and Zoila. Surely, I was not going to die down here in this hidden canyon where no one would care or mourn my passing. The more I struggled, the more securely I was held. After what seemed like an hour, Zoila returned. Her eyes sparkled with amusement, as though she were not all surprised to see me writhing in the mud and sand. She whistled through her teeth and shook her head. "Well, see what all your fuzzing and struggling has done." I tried to straighten up and look dignified. "Zoila, I'm not in no mood for a lecture." "Stand still and listen to me," Zoila said. She leaped up on a decayed log and perched like a parrot with her head cocked to one side. "You're stuck because you think too much. You think your knowledge is going to get you out of this mess you're in. You believe you're going to master the situation with your mind." She chuckled. "Let me tell you where your mental gymnastics will take you. They will take you 5 feet under. You didn't have to leave me. You have left yourself. You don't listen to your will, and you are full of fear. Your clinging mind has brought you to this sad state." She giggled with delight. "Listen to your entirety, Lynn, your total self." "I'm trying," I said. I was. "We have trouble finding our way back to the center of the spiral because we have enthroned the mind. As long as the mind is the ruler, you will spend your life stuck in a swamp just as you are now. You are full of addictions that will strangle you, just as the quicksand will if you let them dominate. You will lose your luminous form and your life force. When that happens, it's all over. You're weak and you slumber." She laughed. "I don't think it's funny," I growled. "But it is funny. The joke is that these addictions prop you up in a false way, just like the mud with no bottom is propping you up. The very sands that are destroying you make you feel safe for a while. Then they begin to suck you under to interminable sleep. You felt safe down here once you got into the bottom of the canyon. You didn't notice that you were on a dangerous foundation and were sinking to your peril. Now you could die. Ponder the lessons of life. We come here to go back to where we came from, but our mind tells us that we need prompts to survive. We believe the king we have enthroned. We obey him and choose intoxicating props such as fear of success or fear of failure or fear of death, or we don't think we're good enough. You felt that way at the top of the canyon. You had to be pushed beyond our king's limits to see that your self-concept was an illusion. That's the addiction you had, and it kept you from walking down toward your own mystery, your enlightenment. Just like on the trail. If one addiction doesn't work, you find a new one. You were afraid to jump over the abyss, but you finally did it. And again you overcame your self-imposed limits. When the spirits of Caldera offered you a treasure, you could not avail yourself of it. Why couldn't I, Zoila? Because you didn't feel worthy of such riches. And what happened next? You slipped and hurt your back. Do you know why? No, because you're afraid to take your power. It's something worth seeing. You backed away from power, your own power. It sounds simple. You lost your faith in your own capacity. This constriction of energy manifested itself as a stabbing pain in your back. I began to sob uncontrollably. The moisture from the mist, the spray, and the heat joined my tears and splashed down into the mud. I tried to throw myself forward, but my upper body wouldn't extend. I dangled forward, racked with spasms. I'm sorry, I didn't do better, I wept. And now you're going to punish yourself even more. That's King Brain talking. Insistently talking. You're too hard on yourself. That's a big addiction for many women. King Brain likes to wreck you, doesn't he? Your fear of desertion is one of his big whips. Your need for approval. All these addictions leak your power right out of you and make you slumber. What can I do, Zoila? You are lucky you have experienced these ordeals, these lessons, for new wisdom is at foot. Be proud of yourself and what you've accomplished. Cease your struggling now. You have ambushed yourself. Sometimes a guide is helpful. She gazed down at me in perfect calmness. Will you guide me? I asked. Stabbing her staff down into the mud, she hopped down off the rotten trunk and walked over to me, not sinking more than an inch. I wonder how she could do such a thing. Zoila, why aren't you sinking? There's a trick, of course, to walking on this ledge. But it is nothing that can be put into words. It can be realized only in the heart and in the total being. She held out her hand and grasped it. Now, don't battle with me. Don't think. Just pull gently on my hand and let yourself be pulled up and out. The mud will release you if you release it. I tugged and followed her advice as best as I could. Nothing seemed to be happening. No victory of any kind over the powerful quicksand. I was about to give up when I looked into Zoila's face. I saw an indescribable force in her eyes. There was a sucking sound and I began to slide free. It almost frightened me, and I grabbed hold of Zoila's arm with my other hand. I was out. I bounded onto the rotten tree trunk and ran back toward the pool and firmer ground. This time Zoila followed me. When I got to the edge of the water, I sat down. I was completely spent but joyous, as though I had been released from the hold of my own lower energies. Zoila crouched down near me. I was still panting but soon managed to get my breath. We sat in silence for some time, watching the whirlpool. Zoila took my hand and led me down the river. We entered the water at a place where it was less turbulent. Islands of foam and jungle foliage floated by as we waded out waist deep. She pointed with her walking stick. She set flat river stone at the bottom of the falls. That one. Yes, she is the seat of Tepochtli. With her waters, I shall wash the mud from your body. Slowly, with great care, Zoila washed the mud from my legs. Then, clasping hands and holding them up to the setting sun, we prayed for a wholeness and transformation in the water of magicians. We thanked the goddess and the spirits that had attended us. Then we splashed for a while. Standing up to our waists, we could feel the strength of the current pulling our legs toward the spiraling whirlpool. The return to Yano was much less precipitous, and thankfully so. A fine rain had begun to fall as we went up zigzagging trail. I hadn't noticed it before. After reaching the top of the rim rock, we headed straight for home and got there just as dusk was settling in. I went immediately to my hammock, and the next morning I awoke before the sun was up. I was filled with the most peculiar kind of energy, a lethargy. I had felt that previous morning I was gone. A whole new level of joy was in my heart, and I indeed felt transformed. An extraordinary life spirit was in me, and I felt like prowling and dancing. I felt at one with the cats, the old yellow dog, and the birds that were walking in the trees. I wanted to wander naked in the jungle and become a wild thing living in the trees. I felt a part of the wind and the smells. I did a few dance steps and twist or two. I saw myself as a huntress along rivers. My hair, the color of my yellow grasses, was blowing in the wind, and my nose was nestled in the soft fur of my mate. I didn't know what to do with all that energy contained within me. I fell back into my hammock and kicked the ground in a slow, rhythmic rocking. The south wind felt like corn silk tickling over my legs. I wondered what would happen if I left everything in Los Angeles and just lived in Llano forever. Life seemed happy and exciting here. Maybe I could just happily exist, just be. I was drifting off dreamily into this new life when I heard a familiar laugh. I've never seen Lynn smile in her sleep before. The words snapped me back to consciousness. "Hi, Agnes," I said. The vision had disappeared. I rubbed my eyes. "I've missed you." Zoila came up next to Agnes and laughingly said, "That's true. I'll bet Lynn has really longed for your return." We went to the caldera yesterday. Agnes feigned surprise. "Did you enjoy yourself?" They stared at me until I finally stammered, "Well, I learned a lot." We all laughed. I sat up in the hammock and watched the sunshine off the dewdrops on the lettuce in Zoila's garden. I felt very relaxed now, and happy with my accomplishment. On the spiraling trail of self-realization, I asked for something to eat. "I'll fix breakfast," Zoila said. We sat around the food, talking and laughing about my experiences with Zoila. It was obvious I was a very happy woman. After a short silence, I asked, "What has happened to Hemayayost, Storm, Agnes? I haven't seen him in such a long time." "Who is Hemayayost, Storm?" Zoila raised her eyebrows. "Storm is a writer, a breed medicine man who comes from the north." Agnes paused for a moment, sipping juice from her gourd cup. "Lynn, your discipline is very different than that of Storm. What you have written about him has been symbolic. This is good. He has taught you the power and use of symbolism, and it has enriched your life. There's no longer a need for this experience. You have become a woman of your own power." I thought about this for a long time, Agnes watching me casually. Finally I said, "But I miss him, and the fun we used to have." "So do I," Agnes said as she and Zoila got up. We cleared the table. Zoila said, "You look confused, Lynn. You're having a problem with literal and symbolic acts." "Yeah, I guess I am trying to understand. In the Bible, Jesus lifted up bread and said, 'This is my body.' Then he lifted up a cup of wine and said, 'This is my blood.' These were literal acts with symbolic meaning. Do you see?" Zoila asked. "Yes, thank you." Zoila gave me a big hug. Thank you guys for tuning in to another chapter of Jaguar Woman. Man, there was a lot in this chapter, so go over it, meditate on it, think it through, and match it to your own experience. And trust me, you'll find something there. Well, thank you very much. My name is Tepochtli. See you guys next time.